Welcome to the Rockin Rich Lynch on the Radio Show. I'm your host, Rockin Rich Lynch, inviting you to join me as we discover great new music by bands and artists from around the world. With interviews, music news and reviews, great prizes, and a whole lot more. Visit us online today at soundpress.net for great music promotion and publicity. Hi, this is Rockin Rich Lynch, and you're listening to the very best of Rockin Rich Lynch on the radio. We recently moved our operations from the New York, New Jersey market to Nashville, Tennessee, and we are now looking for a production and broadcast partner in the region to take the radio show to new heights. If you're a band, musician, solo act, or represent a musical project in any genre, please visit soundpress.net and our new site, musiccitynashville.net, to learn how we can help get your message to the world. Now, please enjoy this great interview from our archives. He is known as the voice of progressive rock music, whose iconic vocal stylings can be heard in not one, but two legendary rock bands, King Crimson, and he is the L in ELP. Please welcome to the program, Mr. Greg Lake. Hey, Greg, how are you?
Very well, Rich. Thank you.
So listen, I hear that you recently hit the cruise ship circuit for the very first time out there on the ocean with the Moody Blues Cruise. And how'd that go for you?
It actually turned out to be a lot of fun in the end. Strange thing, though, it was a bit like playing on a huge tour bus, you know. But the ships are so big, you can hardly feel any movement.
Now, is that something that you're used to? I mean, is seasickness a thing for you, or you didn't have...
No, I don't get any problem like that. But, I mean, you really, apart from the only time I felt any movement on the whole cruise was when I was actually on the stage and, guitarists close their eyes a lot to play. And every time I closed my eyes, that's when I could feel the movement, you know.
Well, that's interesting. I can imagine that. Yeah, those things are supposed to be...
But apart from that, you know, you really wouldn't know that you were in some huge hotel or, you know.
Everybody's doing them nowadays.
It is. It's very popular, and I can see why. I mean, it's a nice thing. You go on board the cruise ship. You go around the Caribbean and stop off at all these exotic islands, and you've got these bands playing day and night, and it's a chance also, I suppose, if you're really a fan of somebody, to get up close and see them close and maybe meet them, and it's a chance really to do that. And so I can, from a sort of combined holiday thing, I think it's quite a nice idea.
Greg, let me give a proper introduction. GregLake.com is the website where you can find out everything that Mr. Lake has going on. Currently, the brand new project is out now. It's called Songs of a Lifetime. It's a CD presentation of your most recent solo touring effects. And I'm hearing a lot of good things about it. I want to talk to you a little bit more about that, but let's just back up a little bit. Greg, the internet is buzzing this week as you revealed in a previous interview how Jimi Hendrix was set to join ELP prior to his death in a new band that would have been called Help. What I'd like to know was how far along was this process, and how well did the ELP members know Jimmy, and had there been previous jams or rehearsals that set this idea in motion?
It actually got blown. The thing got blown up in the press. The truth behind the story was that when Keith and I decided to form a band together, the first person I talked to was Mitch Mitchell, because at that time the Jimi Hendrix Experience had just broken up, and Jimmy had gone off to do this band of angels, a band of gypsy, and so we thought Mitch would be free, and we talked to him. And when I met with Mitch, he said, "Why don't we talk to Jimmy? And maybe get arranged for a jam, and all play together and see if it would work as a four-piece band." And so I said, "Sure," because Jimmy was going to be finished with the band of Gypsies in a week or so, and so that was how we left it. However, a couple of days later, I got a call from a man called Robert Stigwood, who was the manager of the Cream and the Bee Gees, and he said to me, "Greg, I've got this drummer young drummer that would be just perfect for you. His name's Carl Palmer. And he said, I really think you ought to try him out. He's really good. And so I said, fine, give him my number. He said, well, the thing is, if you're interested, he's just off on tour, so you'd have to catch him before he goes off on tour. And so I said, okay, let's see what we can pull together. And what we did is we basically booked a rehearsal room for the following day. And we met up in Soho in London in this little rehearsal room. And it was instantly obvious to all three of us that, there was a special chemistry. And we just knew that was the band. We just knew it. And that was it, really. We formed ELP pretty much on the spot. We never got to play with Jimmy after that. And a few weeks later, of course, he was found dead of a drug overdose, and so that would have ended it pretty much in any case. But we knew Jimmy. He was a lovely guy, and I actually saw the first time he ever played in here in England. I was the support act in a band called The Gods, and we were supporting, and so I saw his first ever appearance in England, and a fantastic guy, but I, looking back in retrospect, I don't really think it would have worked with two sort of soloists, impresarios like that. I think it would have just been overpowering. It would have probably been good for 5 minutes, though,
And once you established the chemistry with the three players, there was never any thought of bringing in any additional guitar player, Hendrix or not?
No, we pretty much had decided, Keith and I, before we even met Carl, that we'd like to try and keep it to a three-piece. There were a number of reasons for that, but basically, that we'd already had that sort of concept established, and so that was pretty much it. When we met Carl, we just really saw that was it. We'd identified really the fact that there was something special, really, the chemistry between all three of us.
Greg, let me ask you about the other band. You were a founding member, along with Robert Fripp, of King Crimson, providing vocals and bass on the debut in the Court of the Crimson King and the follow-up in the Wake of the Poseidon. Fripp is known for his great guitar work and personal peculiarities, such as performing behind a wall of amps in recent years. What can you tell us about working with Robert in the early King Crimson years, and why would Robert choose to do something like that?
Robert and I went to the same guitar teacher, a man called Don Strike, and also another pupil was Andy Summers from Police.
Right.
And so we all went to these lessons, and Robert and I used to practice together when we were kids, and so we pretty much grew up knowing exactly what each other knew on the guitar. So that was one thing it was like brothers, really. It was a bit like two brothers being in a band. We had a complete understanding of what each other knew, and so that was really how it came about. And when King Crimson formed, Robert had never been in a rock band before, and he really had no sort of idea how he was going to appear on stage. And one of the things that our guitar teacher had taught us was these violin exercises by a violinist called Paganini. And Paganini was a sort of he was a very strange character. It was a bit evil, really. He used to play in between two black candles, and he used to challenge other violinists to playing competitions, and it was a kind of nasty piece of work, really. But he was a fantastic player, and Robert had become really sort of fascinated by him. So I suggested to Robert, why don't you base something on the whole idea of Paganini, And so that was what it was, and we went down the Portobello Road in London, and I remember we bought him a load of clothes, dressed him up as this sort of evil Frankenstein, a Jack the Ripper type character, and so that's how it started. with Robert scowling at the audience and playing these blistering fast solos. And it developed from there, I think, playing with his back to the audience and behind the speakers and all of this.
Yeah.
It all came really from Paganini.
And you set it in motion, and that really does explain it, because it has confounded people over the years.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's funny how these things start up. And of course, in those days, it was de rigueur to have some sort of quirky gimmick, I suppose you'd call it. Every guitarist had his thing. You had Pete Townsend doing his windmill and Jimmy burning his guitar, and it was just the thing to do. And so that was Robert. He developed this thing around the concept of Paganini. But I mean, as time went on, that became less and less. And but the music really took over. The music of King Crimson was very powerful, and it really just took over from any concerns about stage image or anything like that. We just got into the music, really.
Yeah, very intense band. So we are on the phone with Mr. Greg Lake, legendary singer, bass player, guitar player. You've heard him all over classic rock radio throughout the years. His new album and CD is called Songs of a Lifetime, and it's a presentation that basically shows and delivers what you've developed over the last year and a half performing live around the world. And it's sort of like a living biography, right, Greg?
It is a bit. I actually developed the idea when I was writing my autobiography, which is finished now and due to come out later in the year. And during the writing of it, these songs would pop up from time to time that, were somehow important in my life, in my career. And, of course, they had stories behind them. And so the idea occurred to me to do a sort of intimate concert and tell these stories and play these songs because, music passes from soul to soul. And it was, in a way, everybody's got these sort of a tapestry of memories in their life, or they attach music to certain memories in their life. And the thought occurred to me that it would be great to actually exchange stories with the audience, so that maybe I would tell a story about a song, then I'd play the song, and then they'd tell a story about it. So we kind of exchanged stories, and that's how it developed, really.
So,
I mean, I come from an age of what I would call shared music. By that I mean that, when I was young, we would buy a record, you would sit around with your friends, and you'd listen to the album, and you'd be bonded in some way by that experience. It would be a shared experience. And I think that was a lot of what really made that whole generation of people, they expressed their culture through the music. They were bonded by that music. I think it's the reason a lot of these huge events took place, like Woodstock, the Isle of Wight, California Jam. A lot of them I played on. And I think it was as much about people going for the event because they felt part of this gathering, as much as it was to go and see their favorite band,
And some of the music that you're sharing is cover songs that were important to you. Like I know Curtis Mayfield's People Get Ready is a staple on that.
Yeah.
Like you said, the fans are also getting up on stage and telling their stories. What's been the most amazing or touching thing that's been revealed to you so far out of that process?
There are a lot of them. I mean, one that comes to mind that really struck me and struck the audience too was one night a gentleman stood up and he said to me, Greg, I used to be a DJ and I did the night shift on the radio. And he said it was one night, it was around midnight, the phone rang, I picked it up, and a man on the other end said, I wonder if you could do me a favor. He said, and I said, yeah, sure, what can I do? He said, could you please play a Greg Lake song? It's called Watching Over You. He said, the thing is, my daughter is dying, and she asked if you would play it. And so the DJ said, well, of course I will, yeah, no problem. And he put the phone down, and that was it. went and got the record and he played it. He didn't say anything on air about the incident, but he played the record, and after an hour or two had passed, the phone rang again, and it was this same man on the phone. And he said, "I just called up to say thank you. She died when you played the record."
Jeez.
And it was an unbelievable moment. And the air just got sucked out of the room. And people start crying, and I'm crying. And I mean, it's just an incredibly sad story. And, you know, it's an amazing thing that in those evenings of Songs of a Lifetime, it's like an emotional roller coaster. You know, 10 minutes later, somebody would be telling a funny story. And so there's laughter and there's tears, and, you know, it's just an emotional roller coaster. And, of course, all this music is passing by. Not only mine, I mean, as you said, I do songs by Elvis, you know, the Beatles, I do a song, you know. So it's a lot of different material. And so in a way, it's a very active, very dynamic show. I was determined not to have it one of those sort of legend in his own lunchtime things, you know, where you bore everybody to death sitting on a stool strumming an acoustic guitar. I wanted it to be an entertaining and an exciting show.
Yeah, that interactive stuff is always, you know, it's always great. Now, when somebody tells a story like that, it must be a hard act to follow. But it sounds like you're figuring out how to, line up the songs and the whole evening of entertainment around. How much of that is that like a segment of the night where people come up and tell their stories, or is that like a big part of it?
Well, yeah, we have a segment really where we stop and, you know, they give the audience radio microphones. And I might do it once, I might do it twice, you know, during the evening. But I tell a lot of stories, just, you know, things about going to see Elvis, for example. And when I played with Ringo, or when I played with The Who, and these things, and I just tell these stories. And so it's a kind of exchange thing. But in the end, you know, yeah, people do stand up and recount incredible things.
It sounds awesome. We were talking about his incredible lifetime in the world of music and his brand new project, Songs of a Lifetime. Greg Lake is on the phone with us. GregLake.com is the website. Greg, you mentioned a little bit about it, but you and your bandmates in King Crimson and ELP were at the forefront of creating a whole new genre of music that there wasn't really a template for at the time. And I wanted to know who your personal influences were that led you to pick up a guitar in the first place. But I'm sure you just mentioned a couple of them. Are there more?
Just really what got me playing, believe it or not, was that I went round to my friend's house when I was very young. I must have been just before I was 12 years old, it must have been, actually. And he had a broken down old guitar. It had one string left on it. And luckily it was the sixth string. And I managed to pick out the tune by Dwayne Eddy, Peter Gunn. Ba 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 ba. Yeah. And I was thrilled that I'd done it, you know. And the thought occurred to me, I wonder if I could learn to play the guitar. And that's how that started, really.
And that became a classic.
Yeah, I mean, just funny little thing like that starts you off. But, you know, I very soon, of course, then I went to Don Strike, the guitar teacher, and I got into all sorts of things then, but particularly a lot of European music. You know, Bob Fripp and our guitar lessons were often, you know, people like Django Reinhardt, or I mentioned Paganini. A lot of European-style music was the staple of our guitar lessons. So when it came to forming a rock band, Robert and I had a European musical background, really. And although I actually had been in a rock band for quite some years before that, so I played a lot of American music. So when we came to form King Crimson, the thing is, you know, how were we going to be different? What could we do to be original? I mean, the whole accent at that time was to be original, to come up with something different. And most rock music in those days had been based upon the blues, soul music, gospel, some country and western, but all American music. That was the inspiration for almost all rock and roll. And we had the idea of making rock music using European influences rather than American influences. So we took, classical influences, medieval music, folk music, but more European style music, and used that as the basis of our music. And so instead of getting sort of 3-minute blues style songs, you got 20-minute epics, which was really more in the form of classical music.
Very interesting, yeah, because that's what progressive rock became, was those long, extended explorations of very technical music, nothing very easy, and that's why you would have to go to those masters probably to get that template.
The thing is, I don't really like the term progressive music because it sounds pseudo-intellectual, which it's not really. And when you break down any music, classical or otherwise, when you look at it in small chunks, it's pretty simple, really. I mean, most classical melodies, you can sing them or whistle them. It's not impossible. And the only thing is, they're not in regular formats. They're not in short packages. They tend to be longer, and they tend to be free from constricting forms. It's not verse, verse, chorus, verse, verse. Classical music, it wanders, and so it's more like a banquet than a snack.
Hey, Greg.
But at the same time, I wouldn't want anybody to think there's anything particularly clever about it. It was just a different way of finding inspiration, a different way of painting the picture.
Like you said, it always seemed more complex than the 3 and 4 chord acts that were made famous in the 60s, like the Beatles and the Stones. And when you guys started doing that, it just seemed that much more complex. But maybe you break it down, it's more easily to understand that way.
Well, yeah, and of course, when you listen to someone like Jimi Hendrix, I mean, you study his playing. That's incredibly complex.
Yeah. Let me ask. I know we're
it's a strange thing how things that appear to be very simple can actually be very complicated.
Well, I know you're a little short on time, Greg. I wanted to ask you, you'll never be forgotten, especially around the holidays. What inspired you to record I Believe in Father Christmas, and how did that help in upgrading your profile as a musician around the world?
Well, the idea for it came really from my childhood. I mean, when I grew up, Christmas, when I was a child, was a time of peace on earth, goodwill to all men. If you were rowing with the neighbors, you'd bury the hatchet. You would often hear it said, "Oh, come on, it's Christmas." Let's forget it. It's Christmas. Let's patch it up. So there would be a lot of goodwill at Christmas, and people would try and look after the old lady down the road. And it was just a warm time. But as I grew older, Christmas became more and more about marketing and about selling, and it became more stressful, and people used to, end up, oh God, how am I going to deal with it? How am I going to afford all these presents, And so I decided to write a serious song about the demise of Christmas. It was never intended to be a hit single. It was really just there as a sort of serious commentary about how Christmas had gone downhill from being a really great time of human compassion and human warmth into this selling opportunity. So that was the idea, and it was told through the eyes of a child, and that's why it was called I Believe in Father Christmas.
And you were very prescient because, back in the mid-'70s, a lot of people weren't really aware of that phenomenon as much. I mean, I sit here, since 1980, my parents used to have a retail store, so the last month of the year was all about the sale. It became a little maddening after a while. And, but year after... I
mean, that's it, Look, I can understand it, how it went and all of that, but I think my main sort of underlying objective was to try and re-stimulate the idea, at least for one day in the year, to try and be a good person, be, generous of spirit, generous with your time, and try and be, for that to be a sort of a reset button, so that, if you had been gone downhill in terms of, maybe you'd fallen out with somebody, that there was a chance to patch it up. On that one day, you could patch it up and reset everything,
Greg, it really is the best of all the rock band sounding Christmas songs out there. Let me just ask you, Greg, I've had many alumni of Ringo's All-Star Band on the show, including Nils Lofgren, Billy Squire, Greg Raleigh, and Gary Wright. You're also a member of this exclusive club, as you mentioned. How was that experience for you?
It was great. It was a great band, actually. It was, of course, Ringo, and you got there was Sheila E., Roger Hodgson from Supertramp, Ian Hunter was in it, Howard Jones played on keyboards. It was a tremendous band, and it was fun. Playing the Beatles music is fun, and feeling. Funny enough, I mean, Ringo is a much better drummer than people ever give him credit for, and he's very dedicated. When you listen to his playing on all the Beatles records, I mean, it's pretty flawless. And when you play with him, you can feel that power. It's like a very heavy clock going on in the background, and you feel what the Beatles felt, and that was a real pleasure for me. It was, and he's actually a very lovely person, very humble, and he's lived a lot. Ringo, he's been through a lot, and he's a very wise person. So yes, it was a terrific experience.
Hey, Greg, I have a stack of questions. I'm not going to be able to get to them all. I'd like to do two more, and then, we have a lot of repeat people who come back on this program. Maybe we can talk to you sometime in the future.
Of course, anytime.
Another one of our favorites on the website is Trans-Siberian Orchestra, and you got to perform with them. You played Carnival 9 with them back in 2006. How do you explain TSO to the uninitiated?
They're very peculiar. It's a strange concept, It is a very strange concept, and they would tell you themselves it is a weird idea. And I mean, when it originally started, they had this idea of doing a progressive music Christmas concert, and everybody laughed at them. They said, "No, that's a stupid idea." And they had one of their friends was a promoter, and they managed to bully him into doing a small show at Christmas. And they did it, and it sold out. And so the promoter friend, he was happy. He thought he'd got off the hook. He'd done them a favor. He did the show, and that was that. It came around the following year. They wanted to do it in a bigger place. And he said, "Oh, no, I've been through it once now. I can't go through it again." And again, they did the concert, and again, it sold out. And so every year it just got bigger and bigger and bigger, until now I think they run 2 shows simultaneously.
Yeah, and
at Christmas. So
yeah,
it's a massive organization, actually.
And they've even done some spring things as well. So they definitely are growing that concept. That weird, strange concept is working. It just goes to show you.
It does, and they're very dedicated. Paul is very dedicated, Paul O'Neill, and they're perfectionists. They like to get it right. And they also have this wonderful ethos for entertainment. They are dedicated to making a great show.
Well, Greg Lake's brand new biography will be out. The autobiography, Lucky Man, will be out on audiobook and in print later in this year. And it was really great talking to you, Greg, today. What do you do for fun outside of the music business?
Not much. So it's a funny thing, but music tends to consume your life in one way or another. I mean, it's not all playing, but things that surround music. But I mean, I do as a hobby. I collect books. Funnily enough, I just fascinated by history of all kinds, and I think books are the way that open doors to the past. And they fascinate me. And it's not the book itself; it's what it leads to.
No, that's interesting.
That's a whole nother radio show, really.
Yeah. Well, it was
for anyone out there who's bored, go and collect books, because it just opens up so many interesting doors, so many interesting people, and you learn a lot. You learn a lot.
Hey, Greg, let's have you on for part 2 when your book Lucky Man comes out. We can continue this conversation, and I can go through my stack and keep this going.
It'll be a pleasure, Ish. Very nice to talk to you.
Great talking to you. Thanks for all the great music.
It's a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Rockin' Rich Lynch on the Radio Show, part of the SoundPress.net radio network. Remember, if you're a band or artist looking for promotion, or if you'd like to sponsor this show or add this program to your station, please get in touch with us today at SoundPress.net.